Mr.ShroomCaster. Before that night, our lives were as normal as they could be. I was the big brother, not a guardian, and though it sometimes felt like my parents leaned on me a lot, I wouldn't call my childhood difficult. We lived in a modest house on the edge of town, always filled with noise. Adam, who was 14, spent hours practicing his electric guitar, while Ethan, only 9, raced his toy cars up and down the hallway, making sound effects that echoed through the house. My parents, Tom and Linda, were hardworking and loving. Dad managed a small auto repair shop and always smelled like grease and motor oil. He loved hanging out with Adam in the garage, teaching him how to fix up an old truck they planned to restore together someday. Mom worked part-time at the library. She had this calm, patient presence and could turn even the dullest evening into something special. Thursday nights were make-your-own pizza night, where we'd all pile into the kitchen, kneading dough and laughing about how someone, usually Ethan, would spill flour everywhere. She'd always say, "It's not about the pizza, it's about the memories." For me, life was stable. I was 23, juggling college classes and a part-time job at a local store. I had dreams of starting my own business someday, maybe a cafe or something in marketing, but those dreams felt distant. My main focus was on helping out when I could and spending time with my brothers. I thought I had all the time in the world to figure things out. The day it all changed started like any other. Dad left early for work, as usual, while Mom dropped Ethan off at school. Adam, who'd overslept again, grumbled as I drove him to class. "You're always on my case," he said, stuffing his guitar into its case. "You act like you never slept in before." I rolled my eyes but couldn't help laughing. Adam had this way of getting under my skin while making me smile at the same time. That evening, my parents decided to go out for a rare date night, a concert in the next town over. Mom told me, "You've got the house tonight. Don't let Ethan eat too much junk food and keep an eye on Adam." Ethan was thrilled because it meant pizza and video games, and Adam muttered something about how I'd probably ground him for no reason. But eventually, he sat on the couch with us to watch a movie. It was a quiet, uneventful night. I answered, and the voice on the other end was calm but firm. It was a police officer. There'd been an accident. A drunk driver crossed into the wrong lane. Everything had happened in an instant. I don't even remember how we got to the hospital. I just remember sitting in a cold, sterile hallway, clutching Ethan's tiny hand as he asked over and over, "They're gonna be okay, right? They're coming home?" I couldn't bring myself to answer. Adam sat a few feet away, staring at the floor with his fists clenched. He hadn't said a word since we got the call. When the doctor came out and said they didn't make it, the world seemed to stop. Ethan collapsed into me, sobbing uncontrollably. Adam stood up, shoved his chair back, and walked away. I knew he didn't want anyone to see him cry. Then came the questions. Who would take care of Ethan and Adam? Where would they live? Social workers started discussing options as if I wasn't even there. They mentioned foster care, possibly splitting them up. Split them up? I said, my voice shaking. No, they're staying together. They're staying with me. The woman from Child Services hesitated. "You're only 23, Caleb. Do you understand what this means? This isn't temporary." "I understand," I said. "They're my brothers. I'll figure it out." I didn't have a plan, and I had no idea how I was going to make it work. But the thought of Ethan and Adam losing not just our parents but each other was unthinkable. That night, our old life ended. I wasn't just their brother anymore. I had to be everything they needed, a parent, a protector, and a provider. Even though I was far from ready, the first few months after the accident were chaos. I was 23, barely scraping by, and suddenly I was expected to take care of a 14-year-old who'd stopped talking to me and a 9-year-old who cried himself to sleep every night. The house felt emptier than ever without Mom and Dad, like it had lost all its warmth. Adam, the middle brother, shut himself off almost entirely. He started spending all his time in his room with his guitar, but instead of practicing the songs he used to love, he just plucked the same sad chords over and over. When I'd try to check in, he'd snap, "Leave me alone, Caleb. I don't need you hovering." Ethan, the youngest, clung to me like a shadow. He'd crawl into my bed at night, trembling, saying he was afraid I'd disappear too. It broke my heart, but I didn't know how to fix it. I wasn't ready to be a parent, but there wasn't time to figure it out slowly. Bills started piling up, and I had to quit my part-time job for something full-time just to make ends meet. I ended up working at a warehouse, moving boxes during the day and trying to manage everything else at night. Between groceries, utilities, and paying for Adam's guitar lessons, one of the few things I couldn't bear to take away from him, my paycheck disappeared faster than I could earn it. Then there were the practical things no one warns you about. like how to pack 2 school lunches in the morning while also making sure everyone gets to class on time, or how to sign permission slips and keep track of parent-teacher conferences. And don't get me started on laundry. I felt like I was drowning in socks and t-shirts. At first, I tried to be the fun brother. I'd order takeout on school nights, let Ethan stay up late playing video games, and tell Adam he didn't have to do chores if he didn't feel like it. But it didn't take long for things to spiral out of control. The house became a mess, and the boys started pushing boundaries. Ethan stopped listening to me when I told him to clean his room, and Adam refused to come to the dinner table. I realized I couldn't be their friend and their parent. I had to choose. I decided that structure was the answer. I made a chore chart, set strict bedtimes, and enforced rules like no screens after 9 p.m. I thought that giving them boundaries would help create some stability, but it didn't go over well. Who do you think you are? Adam yelled the first time I grounded him for sneaking out to a friend's house. You're not Dad. Stop pretending you know what you're doing. Ethan, who used to crawl into my lap when he was scared, started sulking whenever I told him no. I wish Mom was here, he'd whisper, looking at me like I'd failed him. I started doubting myself. Every decision I made seemed to push them further away. As the months turned into years, I felt like I was losing myself. My dreams of starting my own business were gone, replaced by a never-ending grind of work, school pickups, and trying to keep my brothers from falling apart. I barely saw my friends anymore. How could I, when every spare moment went to the boys? There were nights I'd sit in the dark after they went to bed, exhausted and on the verge of tears, wondering how much longer I could keep this up. But I'd remind myself that I didn't have a choice. They were my responsibility. Mom's words echoed in my head constantly. It's not about the pizza. It's about the memories. I tried to recreate her little traditions, like Thursday night dinners, but the laughter was gone. Adam barely showed up to eat, and Ethan just pushed his food around on his plate. I was giving up everything to keep us together, but it felt like the harder I tried, the further apart we grew. There were rare moments of connection that kept me going, like when Ethan made a drawing of our family for school and included me as the best big brother ever. Or the time I heard Adam playing a song he'd written, and it was actually good, better than good. But those moments were fleeting, and they were always followed by arguments or silence. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was failing them. I told myself it was just a phase, that things would get better once they adjusted. But deep down, I was scared. Scared that I wasn't enough, that I was letting Mom and Dad down, and scared that one day, Adam and Ethan would look back and remember me not as the brother who stepped up, but as the one who ruined everything. 3 years. That's how long it had been since the accident. Long enough for routines to settle, but not long enough for the pain to fade. I had done everything I could to keep us together. I worked 2 jobs, skipped out on any kind of social life, and poured every ounce of energy into making sure Adam and Ethan were cared for. But something was wrong. We weren't just struggling. We were falling apart. Adam was 17 now, and he barely looked at me anymore, let alone spoke to me. He was finishing high school, but he'd become distant and cold. He spent most of his time either out with friends or locked in his room. The only thing he seemed to care about was his music. One day, while I was cleaning up, I found a letter from a university under a pile of clothes in his room. He'd been accepted to their music program, but he hadn't told me. My stomach dropped. This was big news, something worth celebrating, and yet I wasn't even part of the conversation. That night, I knocked on his door and handed him the letter. When were you planning on telling me about this? He barely glanced at me. I wasn't. What's the point? What do you mean, what's the point? Adam, this is huge. I'm proud of you. He scoffed. Yeah, sure. Proud enough to lecture me about how expensive it's gonna be, or to remind me I'll probably have to stay close to help out with Ethan. I've heard it all before, Caleb. That's not fair, I shot back. I've done everything I can for you guys. He stood up and glared at me, his voice rising. Everything for us? Or everything to control us? You don't care about what we want, Caleb. You just care about being the guy who kept the family together. Those words cut deep. I didn't even know how to respond. He pushed past me and left the house, slamming the door behind him. Ethan, now 12, was quieter than ever. He used to be the kid who asked a million questions about everything, but now he barely spoke unless it was absolutely necessary. When I tried to talk to him, he'd shrug or mumble something and quickly find an excuse to leave the room. One night, I sat down with him after dinner. Hey, bud, you've been pretty quiet lately. Is everything okay? Yeah, he said, staring at the table. Are you sure? You can talk to me about anything. You know that, right? He fidgeted with his fork, but didn't answer. Finally, he mumbled, "It's just, I miss Mom and Dad." His words hit me like a freight train. Of course he missed them. I missed them too, but I didn't realize how much he was still holding inside. "I miss them too," I said softly. "Every day." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with tears. "It's not the same anymore, Caleb. Nothing's the same. You try to act like them, but you're not. You're not them." I tried to pull him into a hug, but he pulled away and ran upstairs. I sat there, staring at his unfinished dinner, wondering how I'd let it come to this. The breaking point came one evening when I overheard Adam and Ethan talking in the living room. I'd just come home from work and was about to walk in, but their voices stopped me in my tracks. "Why does he have to be so controlling?" Adam said, his voice low but full of frustration. "He's just trying to help," Ethan replied, though he didn't sound convinced. "No, he's trying to replace Mom and Dad. And he sucks at it," Adam snapped. "He doesn't get us. He just wants to make himself feel good about being the responsible big brother." I leaned against the wall, feeling like the wind had been knocked out of me. Was that really how they saw me? As some overbearing tyrant trying to fill shoes too big for me? For years, I thought I was doing the right thing, making sacrifices, setting boundaries, being the parent they needed. But somewhere along the way, I'd lost sight of what they actually wanted. Someone who listened, someone who understood their pain. That night, I sat alone in the living room, replaying every choice I'd made since the accident. The rules, the chores, the curfews, they'd all been my way of trying to create stability. I thought structure would hold us together, but I realized I hadn't been the brother they needed. I'd been so focused on keeping things under control that I forgot to let them grieve. I forgot to let myself grieve too. I had tried to be their parent, but in doing so, I'd stopped being their brother. And now, I wasn't sure if I could fix it. After hearing Adam and Ethan's conversation, I couldn't sleep. Their words replayed in my head like a broken record. He's trying to replace Mom and Dad, and he sucks at it. I sat in the dark, staring at the family photo on the mantle. It was from a summer picnic a year before the accident. Mom and Dad smiling, Adam holding his guitar, Ethan with a juice box in hand, and me in the back, grinning like a carefree older brother. I barely recognized that person anymore. Somewhere along the way, I'd let the weight of responsibility crush the part of me that they'd loved. I couldn't go on like this. If I wanted to save what little connection we had left, I needed to change. The next day, I took a day off work and decided to start with Adam. He'd skipped breakfast as usual, and I knew he'd be in the garage with his guitar. He spent hours there, avoiding me and the rest of the world. When I walked in, he looked up briefly, then went back to strumming. "What do you want?" he asked, his tone flat. "To talk," I said, pulling up a folding chair across from him. He didn't stop playing. "I'm busy." I took a deep breath. "Adam, I know I've screwed up. I know you're mad at me, and I don't blame you. But I need you to know that everything I've done has been because I care about you and Ethan." He snorted. "Yeah, great job showing it." "I'm serious," I said, my voice cracking. "I've been so focused on trying to keep things together that I forgot to ask what you needed. I thought rules and structure would make things better, but I see now that I was wrong." Adam stopped playing and looked at me for the first time in what felt like months. "You don't get it, Caleb. You think we need another parent, but we don't. We need you. You're not Mom or Dad, and you never will be. And that's okay. But you've been so busy trying to be them that you've forgotten how to just be our brother." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. He wasn't yelling or angry. He was just tired. And for the first time, I really listened. "You're right," I said quietly. "I've been trying to do everything their way because I didn't know how to do it my way. But I promise I'm going to try to be better, for both of you." Adam didn't say anything, but his shoulders relaxed, and for the first time in years, I felt like there was hope. That evening, I found Ethan in his room, sketching something in his notebook. He didn't look up when I knocked, but I stepped in anyway. "What you working on?" I asked, sitting on the edge of his bed. "Nothing," he muttered, closing the notebook. "Ethan, I need to talk to you," I said gently. "I know things haven't been easy, and I know I haven't always been what you needed me to be. I've been trying so hard to take care of you and Adam that I haven't stopped to ask what you actually need." Ethan finally looked up, his eyes wide with surprise. "You mean like, you're not going to yell at me about my messy room?" I chuckled. "Not today." He hesitated, then asked, "Why do you always get so mad? It feels like everything I do makes you upset." Hearing that broke my heart. "I'm not mad at you, Ethan. I've just been scared. Scared of losing you and Adam. Scared of messing everything up. But that's not your fault." I've been putting too much pressure on both of you because I didn't know how else to handle things. Ethan shifted closer, and for the first time in a long time, he looked at me like his big brother again. I miss how things used to be, he whispered. I do too, I admitted. But we can't bring Mom and Dad back. What we can do is figure out how to be a family again. And that starts with me being a better brother. Ethan nodded slowly. Okay. It wasn't much, but it was enough. That weekend, I called a family meeting. Adam and Ethan sat on opposite ends of the couch, clearly skeptical. I've been thinking a lot, I started, about how I've been running things around here. I've been too strict, too controlling, and I see now that it's made things worse. So, from now on, things are going to be different. Adam raised an eyebrow. Different how? For starters, no more chore charts, I said. Ethan's jaw dropped, and I smiled. That doesn't mean you're off the hook completely, but we'll figure it out together. And curfews? They're negotiable, within reason. Adam looked suspicious. What's the catch? No catch, I said. I just want us to talk more. To actually listen to each other. I know I can't fix everything overnight, but I'm going to try. And if I mess up, I need you to tell me. Deal? Ethan grinned and nodded enthusiastically. Adam was slower to respond, but eventually, he muttered, deal. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it felt like the first real step toward healing. That night, as I sat in the living room alone, I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time, I wasn't trying to carry everything by myself. I didn't have all the answers, and I probably never would. But I didn't need to be perfect. I just needed to be their brother, and that was enough.